people will act a certain way in regards to their unconscious racism. They see you, oh, where are you from? You're very articulate. You know, I'm articulate.
An author, a psychotherapist, Lola Jaye.
Well, we know that when a child is born, they're not born with any racist ideals. It changes about 3. When they go to school, they see the differences. And it's quite sad when you see that, because there is conditioning that happens after that. What I try to do with my work, with my books, is kind of show a little piece of that.
So of everything you've ever learned, everything you've ever achieved, what's your top tip for happiness?
Stay authentic. Don't let anybody try to mold you into something that you're not, which is any industry. Stay true to who you are. I know that sounds slightly cliche, but it's true.
I am so glad you could join us. I'm your host, Gawdat. This podcast is nothing more than a conversation between 2 good friends sharing inspiring life stories and perhaps some nuggets of wisdom along the way. This is your invitation to slow down with us. Welcome to Slo Mo. Thank you for joining us. Today's guest wrote this heart-wrenching story. It's I don't know what to tell you. 2 children kept in an attic with 100 years between them, based on a true story. Oh my God. And a bit of imagination when I spoke to the author, but what a story. You know, I avoid to hurt my heart. Normally, I don't want to spend my life, in things. I believe life has enough drama on its own, so why add more synthetic drama? But this will teach you so much. It's called The Attic Child. And the author is an author, a psychotherapist, a speaker, Lola Jaye, who is an incredible British Black author. We're going to talk about that. And 7 novels already, with a few other writings like me, who that she writes but doesn't publish yet. So I'm going to try and convince her to publish them. And it is, again, part of our mini series associated with the publication of my book, That Little Voice in Your Head. We published almost the same time. So it is... It's an honor and a privilege to welcome Lola. Lola, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for hurting my heart. This story is, you say it's a true story. I mean, it's a child in 1907.
Yes.
That's kept in an attic. And then another child 100 years later that is kept in the same attic.
Yeah. Well, the true story part ends with just a child who basically was brought over here from Africa in the Edwardian era by an explorer. And I saw his photograph in the National Portrait Gallery, and I knew I had to write his story. So he actually died at 12, so there wasn't much to write about. So I went about rewriting his story. And the question was, what would have happened if he had lived? So the part of the attic, that's more my imagination, I'm afraid, which probably says a lot about me, because I wanted a way of bringing his story out, but bringing it out where there is some drama, that something happens. So this is where the story of these 2 children come about. I wanted to show this child in Edwardian times, but also a child in more modern times at the same time.
So what is the relationship between them? I mean...
Oh, well...
we're not going to do any spoilers because everyone's going to read this, but...
No. Well, he is locked in the attic 100 years before, as you said. And then 100 years later, when she... almost 100 years later, when she's locked in the attic, she finds these artifacts belonging to somebody. And then she realizes that somebody was here before her. So she finds a necklace, an African bone necklace, and some writing on a wall in an unidentifiable language. So she sets about finding who was this person who was in this attic before me and why.
Why? Why did we do this? Why? I mean, I don't understand humanity, to be honest. How can that be done?
Exactly. And it was done. Children were brought over quite routinely from Africa. This is post-slavery, maybe as companions, accessories. So it wasn't always just about them coming over to work or be a maid. It was, oh, look, I have an accessory, almost like, oh, I have a pet dog. So researching this book, it was quite disturbing because there's a lot of things that I found out during that time. And it was a very unique time that I was doing this. I was doing this in 2020 and we know what happened then.
You were locked in your attic.
Basically. So I'm writing about these two children locked in an attic. You know, I live by myself. So I was in my apartment by myself. It's not the same thing, obviously, but we were told not to leave at certain times. So I thought that was quite ironic. And also I'm writing about racism and imperialism at a time when statues have been, you know, pulled down. And the particular person that this is based on, he has a statue too. His name is Stanley. He has a statue that wasn't pulled down, but you can see the similarities that were going on during the time that I was writing this. It was intense.
It's always intense, isn't it? I mean, when you really look at our life today, I wonder if we have actually passed those times. I mean, luckily, it's not as accepted as it is in the world, but there is a lot of modern day slavery today. There is a lot of modern day racism. Yeah. Would you share a little bit about your own experience? So seven books ago, you started in 2008, was your first?
Yeah, my first novel. You know, as a writer, you write for years unpublished. So I actually got published 2008.
Oh, is that true? So you wrote how many before that?
Ooh, I call them the under the cupboard manuscripts. Oh. So there was a couple that probably was a good idea it wasn't published, but
okay.
But I feel that as any writer, you have to hone your skills. So the first one you write probably isn't going to be the first one you get published, but you know, you're learning as you go along, for sure.
And you know, you write prolifically. Like you write. How long did this very, very thick manuscript take you?
The Attic Child was kind of unique because it had been in my head for a few years, so it just poured out. Within 6 months, I had the first draft. But that's only the first draft. I mean, it's never look. You know what that's like, Mo, right? It's not great. But the first draft, I always say, I just write for myself and just get everything out that's in my head. Because this little boy, his name is Ndugu Mahali, the original child. It was almost like he was plaguing me. You know, you've got to write this now. So I just had to let everything out. So it almost felt easy to do that. It just became hard when I had to edit it because I had to do the research. And obviously that was quite traumatic for me at that time to be reading about certain things that I was reading about. But the first draft, yeah, that was quote unquote easy.
So as you do your research, tell me openly and honestly, how much has changed?
In regards to your original question?
In regards to our racism and our acceptance of...
I feel that we've still got a very long way to go. I feel that in the era that I'm writing about, it was more overt. So, you know, let me bring this black child over to be my pet. It's so overt. Nowadays, it's inside, it's still there. So whereas when I was a little girl, I was called the N-word because my school was in an area that was very, very white. And so I was called that quite openly. But now I think we have it. I mean, that still happens, unfortunately, but we still have this thing called unconscious bias where people will act a certain way in regards to their unconscious racism, whether it's if they see you, oh, where are you from? You're very articulate. You know, I'm articulate? Oh, okay. You know, just things like that.
Oh,
they're not
man.
great. Yeah, I've got that. Yeah,
man,
as old as I am.
With humans.
Yeah, it's not great.
You see where I come from, there is a very, very famous saying in Islam where basically there's no difference between an Arab and a foreigner, a person of light skin and a person of dark skin, other than by their good deeds. And it's so entrenched in all of us. But I can promise you, and I swear this is true, growing up in Egypt, because in Egypt you have all skin colors and they're all fellow Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
I actually never noticed. In my mind, I remember vividly that I had this a friend of mine who was from Sudan, and so his hair was curlier than mine. And we would just make fun of how curly his hair is.
Yeah.
But I actually never saw him as a different person. It was like my best friend, right? And in an interesting way, if you're never really exposed to that, you don't notice any difference. But then somehow in some societies, it becomes so prominent, even though we hide it, that it is the first impression people have of other humans. Is this because of the past conditioning? Like if you frequently, like in New York City, the taxi drivers are foreigners, so you expect every taxi driver to be a foreigner. I mean,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Well, we know that when a child is born, they're not born, with any racist ideals. It changes about 3 when they go to school. They see the differences, and it's quite sad when you see that, because there is conditioning that happens after that. So yeah, this is something that's ingrained. It's ingrained in society, and it's not something that will change overnight. But what I try to do with my work, with my books, is kind of show a little piece of that. To kind of highlight it, but in subtle ways. Because I think the ways we've spoke about already are quite overt, but there are subtle ways that I like to bring that out.
So in that little voice in your head, in the very, very first part of the book, I talk about the things that make us really unhappy. And one of them is this kind of conditioning. It's the idea of finding something within you that really almost dictates your entire behavior, your entire perception of the world, your value set, but that this thing is not something you're fully aware of at all. And, you end up suffering as a result of a fact that your behavior is informed literally by the opinions of others, not by your own self.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about going back to 2008, being published for the first time. It is a reality that the publishing industry is still not very diverse at all. So what was your experience going through that?
Well, there wasn't many people that looked like me then. And it was interesting because the book that I had out then was a fiction book, but it was mostly about grief, about a father who was dying and wanted to teach his little girl how to be a person before he went. So he wrote her this manual. And so Black people that were being published then, it was mostly about race, I guess. And I hear I've written a book about everybody. So I think that was unique in that sense. And it's only now when I meet people that were in the industry then said, oh, you inspired me. And, I've had an editor say that to me that, she felt inspired by me. She was like an assistant at the time because there wasn't any women of color or many women of color there. So yes, publishing has changed. And we know that post 2020 and what happened then, it's forced a lot of change. So it's my hope that it will continue that way. And it's not just a flash in the pan. But so far, so good.
Do you believe, so you have your beautiful, oh my God, such a beautiful smile on your picture on the backside with your lovely fluffy hair. I don't know which hair to like more. Do you believe this makes you sell more books or less books, or is it irrelevant?
At the moment, we're living in a different time. I think post 2020, it's different. There are more diverse, some excellent writers now being recognized. There were always great Black writers, but they weren't given the chance. And now they are. So what sells more books? Do you know the secret to that? Tell me.
I actually have a theory, believe it or not, and I complain about it to a lot of people. Most books, because of the way the industry is done, and you want to hit the charts, because if you hit the charts, you become very successful, right? But hitting the charts basically is a question of how many books sold in 1 week. Which, if you ask me, is a marketing job.
Yes.
Has nothing to do. I mean, like, I could write a book that has a good cover because that's marketing, a lot of branding on the cover so that it attracts people, a bit of, a clickbait as the title, and white pages inside. If I market it well and it sells enough on the first, week, it will hit the charts and more people will buy it and say, interesting that he kept the pages white,
right?
Right?
Yeah.
And it really is quite a thing for me, because my very first dear friend and agent. So my very first interaction with the publishing industry was through my wonderful friend and agent, Michael Carlisle. And Michael, when we were writing Solve for Happy, simply said, look, there are books that hit the charts and there are books that are evergreens. And he basically completely instructed me, almost in an authoritarian way, to not attempt to not write the book for the charts, but rather write the book so that everyone who reads it tells two people who will tell two people, which was my mission anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his his instruction was very clearly, I want you to sell more copies of your book every year than the year before.
Right.
And believe it or not, that's actually the case with Solve for Happy. So Solve for Happy sells more every year than the year before.
That's awesome.
Which basically means that more people like it enough to recommend it to their friends, and then their friends would buy more of it. Again, not about selling books, but really about spreading the message. But like you, I mean, I have to admit, I didn't belong at all in the industry, not just because of my ethnicity, but also because of my title. I mean, like, who's this techie who's writing about happiness? And we get all of those preconceived perceptions, like, unless you're a psychotherapist or a psychologist, why are you writing on a topic that's not yours? And it was quite interesting how we had to work through that. You do the opposite. So you are a psychotherapist.
Yeah, I have a private practice. Yeah.
So tell me about that. I want to talk about happiness a little bit. So what is your practice about?
Well, happiness can be quite elusive to some people. And sometimes that is the aim, but it's not always possible in the higher sense. So really, I like to focus on, I mean, obviously I can't talk about individual clients right now, but just as a whole, the way I work is, it's about being happy in the moment. Because sometimes we have these ideas that I'm going to be happy when I get the house, I get the car. Would know. And I've been there. What happens now in this moment? This is so important. This moment that we're living right now. What makes you happy? It might be, going for a walk in the park might make you happy in this moment. It might be, watching your child sing, whatever it is. Be in that moment and acknowledge that happiness. It's not about you'll be happy when, because you might be waiting 20 years or it may never happen. That big car that you want. So if it doesn't happen, then what happens to you?
Yeah. I think the more interesting bit is that until it happens, you're unhappy. And then when it happens, you go like, that's it.
Exactly.
Right? So what else should I want now to keep going and wake up every day? Right?
Exactly. And there's always something bigger, isn't there? So you want, maybe you want the Merc, then you might want the Lamborghini. So you're always chasing. In that time, you're not being happy in the moment. You're not appreciating the most beautiful things, that you could appreciate. And that's really about me as well. I've learned in the past few years to appreciate the small things. They're important because life is short. That is a cliche, but it's true.
I think it's long, honestly. But
Do you? Explain that to me, Mo.
I don't know. I believe that my personal experience is that life feels very short when you're not living it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's quite interesting because I do meditate the traditional way, but I also in that little voice in your head, I have a chapter about experiential thinking and the idea of meditation and how you can focus entirely on what I call meditation in the modern world. Because to be in the meditation room for 10 minutes a day doesn't cut it. It really doesn't reconfigure your brain in the ways that I'm trying to promise people in that little voice in your head. And I started to practice this perhaps 12 years ago. Before that, I refused the word meditation. When someone told me to say I was like, get out of here, right? I don't want to talk to you, right?
Right.
But then, then I started to learn. And I started to realize something. If you know the Pink Floyd song, it's called Time, actually, appropriately titled. The lyrics would say, and then someday you find 10 years have gone behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And that lyric stopped me one day because, yes, we're now in June, okay? And it feels like it's February. And I kept questioning that for a long time. Why does time fly so much? And why does it sometimes actually feel there? Like, why am I enjoying this conversation so much, and it will remain as a big part of my memory? I'm not gonna remember it as 1 minute, just like I remember the last 6 months as 1 month. I'm gonna remember it as a full hour, right? And the difference is really interesting. In my research, I realized that the moments where you live fully in the moment register in your mind as moments when you've lived.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when I started to do that by being present all the time, I promise you, I feel that the 10 years I lived since then, or 12 years I lived since then, have been longer than my entire life, because time literally slows down when you're present, when you're fully in there. And then, I'm not saying it's too long, but I'm saying we can make it longer. We can make ourselves live if we actually avoid all of the distractions and the binge watching of Netflix and literally be in the present moment, right?
I think that's a great point. And I think not enough of us are present.
At all.
We're just rushing about onto the next thing. And I think that's the thing that the lockdown did. It forced people to slow down. You know, people were saying, oh, I spent time with my kids. I took them to the park. What were you doing before? So, and then people were saying that has forced me to do that, and I'm going to carry that on. But I'm not seeing much evidence of that now. Now
Sadly
people are getting
not.
back to normal, aren't they? Yeah. But yeah, I think that is definitely the key word, is being present. And being present can just mean the smallest and sweetest thing. It doesn't have to be anything huge. As you said, this conversation now, we are present. There are no distractions.
Yeah.
And it's not very easy to do that. I know you mentioned meditation, where I've tried to do that sometimes, but the distractions, it's a skill to actually be able to do that.
Yeah, I find that traditional meditation, one of my favorite conversations when I was here on Slo Mo was Galen Tupton, who is sort of one of the most prominent monks in the United Kingdom. And his view of meditation is that most people fail at it because they think there is a way to succeed at it. Okay.
Yeah.
And what he taught me was, no, the idea of meditation is you want to fail at it so that you pull your brain back down to calm. So, you're trying to be calm and have a mind that's not too active. And then your mind escapes and goes into something, right? And then you bring it back down to calm. That exercise, in his view, is what is needed. So to be better at meditating, what he says is you need to get distracted every now and then, because without distraction, you're not doing the muscle, you're not exercising the muscle that brings you back. How do you write then? If you're, you spend, I'm guessing, hours every day in that zone that is highly meditative, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your writing style.
I mean, this story gripped me from the start, and I knew I had to write it. So once I stop procrastinating, because every writer will tell you that's what they do. Once I've done every chore in the house that needs doing or doesn't need doing.
Which you didn't want to do anyway.
No, and it didn't really need doing anyway.
Yeah.
I can, once I start, that's it. Once the characters, they come alive, they actually just leap off the page. And so it then becomes quite easy. You get to know them. I must confess, I do have conversations with my characters.
Do you?
Yeah. When I'm not writing, I just get to know them. And
No, hold on.
I've confessed something here.
I'm not gonna pass this one. What does this mean? So you're gonna be cooking some pasta for you and for the child, or?
No, it usually happens when I go to sleep, or before I go to sleep, or when I wake up.
That's incredible.
Like I've had ideas when I've been asleep, and that's why I have a notebook by my bed. And they always say just to write it straight away, because I forget if I have a dream about a character. But before I go to bed, there's conversations. I know I sound a bit off, don't I?
No, it sounds amazing, honestly.
So there's an intimacy there. So I know them. I know what they're thinking. I know what they like, what they don't like. So when I'm in that zone of writing, it's just easy. It just comes out because I already know them.
I think actors do that.
Do they?
They sort of live in character. So they don't have conversations with the character, but they have the conversation as if they were the character.
Yeah, definitely. So I had to kind of be this, 8-year-old boy
That's
I've
so
never been an
interesting.
8-year-old boy. So
Mhm.
it was...
You never know.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, that's reincarnation. That's another conversation, Mo. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
But
I don't remember being an 8-year-old
no, I
boy, I think
don't.
is an accurate description. Yeah.
So it was, it's quite challenging, but it's something that I feel, it just happens. I don't tell myself I'm going to do it. It just happens. They become a part of me for a while. And usually when the book is delivered, they then leave. But this little boy, he didn't leave until my book launch on last month, the 5th of May. And I was about to have the book launch at the bookshop, and he just left.
Did he?
Yeah.
I find that really touching. I mean, the way you told me the story before we started the recording about, him literally waiting for you to finish 2 more books.
Yeah.
Do you think it's actually him? I mean...
I don't know. I wouldn't want to say. I just know that the voice was strong. It was real. And I just hope I made him proud.
I think you have, for sure. So you go back to, let's go back to therapy a little bit. So, this is your training, you work as well. I mean, you have clients. So
yeah.
How do you mix the two of those? We all know you as this way.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not very far apart because all the themes in my book always do cover mental health to an extent. They just do. It's like I can't help myself. They just do. But as a therapist, my therapist hat, I can be the two different people. My friends will say no. They'll say I'm always analyzing them. But they do intertwine, but they're also separate in that sense. As a therapist, it's such a privilege. I mean, both jobs are such privileges in the sense that as a therapist, I have this access to people's lives. I don't have the right, but I do. And it's a privilege. In this way, in writing, I get to speak to people en masse about issues that are important to me. I mean, that is such a blessing.
It's an enormous gift, yeah.
To be able to do that. And so in that way, they're very similar because I just feel very privileged to do both.
I had, when my son, after he died, I got a message basically to read Elif Shafak's The 40 Rules of Love, which I believe he sort of insisted that I read. And the book was really all about... it's a beautiful... I don't read nonfiction. I don't read fiction a lot, but this, was a book I couldn't put down about that. 2 stories happening, one in the modern world, and one is between Rumi, the poet and the scholar, and Shams, Shams, who was the friend that ignited him to become the poet that he was. And the story basically was telling Rumi... in a very interesting way that you cannot teach anyone anything until you've been part of their life. So Rumi, that, scholar sitting in the mosque and, teaching people and preaching to people, then starts to go to the brothel and to the bar and to the, sit next to the homeless person and basically starts to really live people's lives. And I think what you're saying is true. I'm not in therapy, but I get the privilege of, connecting to the lives of so many thousands of people. And somehow you get this bit of, I don't know what to call it, maybe pattern recognition, that certain things get us to become unhappy and they become repetitive. And yes, every person you talk to will say it from a slightly different angle, a slightly different script, maybe a slightly different novel, but they seem to fit within certain categories. And my work in That Little Voice in Your Head is basically saying that the biggest or the easiest to cut off in this category is thought, is the negative thought. And you tend to believe that this negative thought idea is quite paramount to our human unhappiness.
Yeah, definitely. It's so easy to focus on the negative. And there is something that I call fortune telling. It's actually big in CBT, this word fortune telling, cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not a cognitive behavioral therapist, just want to add that. But I do like this thing about fortune telling, because when you think a negative thought, then your brain goes to the future and it's negative. So for example, I don't know, if I don't get this job, I'm not going to be able to afford anything. I'm never going to be able to get my own place. You're now looking into the future. So my thing is, don't be a fortune teller because you don't have that gift. Bring it back to now. And what you said earlier about being present, be present. Okay, what are the things that you're doing now, that bring you joy and so forth? Be present, because when we think about the future and it's negative a lot of the time when you're stuck in that negative thought pattern, So again, it's just the thing again, be present, strip it to now.
But it's easy for you and I to say this.
It is.
Right? People will always tell me, but you're an author, a famous author. You had a good career. You're not really struggling with 3 jobs a day. I actually am struggling with 3 jobs. But,
Yeah.
I count them. I count 5 jobs in my life. But people will say you don't have the same pressure. So it's easy for you to say be present. It's easy for you to say cut the negative thinking. It's easy to do those things. How true is that for you?
For me, I would say I've been there, and life, even for those that are on the outside look like they've got everything, you don't know people's struggles, and that's the thing. And as a therapist, you totally get it in the sense that we have this persona. And I think the Instagram generation are very good at that. This persona that everything is okay. And I have this analogy about the duck. When you see a duck gliding across the river, but underneath they're paddling crazily. A lot of us are doing that, So for me personally, because I'm assuming your question is to me, I've been there, I've struggled. I definitely know what that's like. I've gone through grief. I mean, I was recently, I'd say within the last, 5 years ago, within the space of 2 years, I lost 3 members of my close family, one after the other. So, but even in that, there has to be something, because there'll be nothing otherwise. It's about finding what that is. Is there a light? Even if that light is the size of a needle, it's something. We'll work with that. Yeah, we'll work with that. Something. And I think, in answer to your earlier question about the 2 disciplines that I'm in, whether it's writing and therapy, with therapy, sometimes it's a slow process, or you may not get the result that you want. But when I'm writing, I get the result I want. The person will go through the trauma, but boy, they're going to come out okay in the end. So I get to control that part, whereas the other part I don't get to control. That is the client's job, to control their narrative. I'm not going to control that for them. But with that, I'll control it, and I'll do what I like.
That's such an interesting way, because when I write, I don't do what I like, actually.
Right.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I attempted to write a fiction that I felt was very important at a point in time. I don't know the magic bits, like you guys have a twist in the middle and then you do, like, I don't understand that stuff. I basically say it exactly as it is. It's like, okay, this applies that way. It moves this bolt, which, goes into that nut. And, life to me is very, very mechanical. If you think
logic.
There is logic and there are facts, right? Okay. So I don't allow myself to go wherever I want to go. But what you're saying here is that, which I have to admit, and now I can see it more, is that those characters are sort of almost representative of real stories that the reader will relate to.
Definitely.
It's my traumas here, written in the voice of another character. And then maybe as you see how the story ends or how the story evolves, you start to think about your own story and how it should end and evolve. That's I didn't know that.
And I think everyone can relate to different stories in different ways. So people can relate to being displaced. People can relate to being lonely, whatever the theme is. But it's about having that outcome, and the desirable outcome is that everything's going to be okay. And that means different things to different people.
What's okay for that child?
For that child, it's about autonomy, being their own person. Because if someone is dictating your life, then the ultimate must be that you take that over, that your life then becomes your life and you make the decisions about that life. It's autonomy. Isn't that what everyone's chasing? To some extent?
I think it is. However, I think the beauty of this story is that it doesn't come without paying a bit of a price for it, right?
Absolutely. There is pain. there is some trauma, but there's also hope. And every book I write, I have to leave the reader with hope. Because again, if there's no hope, then what do we have? And I said, if that hope is the size of a needle, that's fine. We'll work with that.
Okay. I wanna ask you, of all of your characters, which was your favorite?
In this book?
In general.
Oh, no.
They're your friends.
I know, but
you talk to them.
But I've let all the other books go. This is the current one.
Okay, we'll talk about this current one. Which one is your favorite?
Dikembe, the main character, the little boy, because he's a real person.
Mine too, yeah. When I asked you when we were having coffee before, and I said, so how's the book doing?
Ooh.
You answered, you gave me the best answer ever. You said, I don't know, I don't check.
No, I don't.
That is so cool.
Is it?
Oh my God. Like, you write the book, you put it out there. There could be 1 million people reading it right now, reading through your soul, and you have no idea.
No, I have literally no idea, because I don't want anything to interrupt the process of me writing the next book or turn it into a negative thought. I'm not immune to these things. Because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I'm perfect. It's so easy.
Surely not.
No. We are flawed individuals too. So that it's a seed, isn't it? So basically the seed will be planted that, just in case it wasn't what I want to hear, the numbers weren't what I want to hear. Then it'll be, clearly I'm going to now start fortune telling. So, clearly this book's not going to do well. I'm never going to write again. It sounds a bit dramatic, obviously, but my brain is very dramatic. So, and then I'm just going to go there, and I don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. I've got another book to write. I want to be in a good frame of mind, and I want to be present. Because by me going into the future, I'm no longer present. So I don't want to know. No. And it's funny, I spoke to somebody yesterday. I was having an interview, and they said, I was listening to your book on audiobook, but I had to go and have a physical copy. So I went into Waterstones in Liverpool to buy them. And they just had one left.
Yeah.
I'm like, but how many did they order before though? So in my mind, I'm going negative thinking, well, they only had 2 anyway. So
is that only one that they bought?
Exactly. And so they said, no, they had 10. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, that's nice.
Mm-hmm. I have 9 victims already, and you're the 10th, right?
Exactly. But my mind was trying to go negative there, thinking,
I know what you mean.
So I'm guilty of that. And I have to check myself constantly, because I know where it could lead.
Yeah.
It's a seed, isn't it? And it just turns into this weed.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I remember vividly, I was giving a talk in Vegas when Solve for Happy came out, and 12,000 people in the audience. And normally when I give a talk about happiness, you get a lot of people ordering the book. So I told my publisher beforehand that I was going to do that talk. I told them in the US, it's going to run out of stock. So please print extra. And so I think they printed like 2,000 copies or something. And literally, like basically 10 minutes into the talk, Amazon starts to show, if you order, it's going to be 2 weeks away, because they ran out of stock. And I thought the same thought at the time. I was like, come on, people, like, come on, we got people interested. They were going to invest in their happiness. And then suddenly I said, but 2,000 people got a copy. Like, can you think of that, Mo? Like,
Amazing.
and others are okay, right? They're going to get it 2 weeks later, or maybe it's not the time for them to get it yet. And when you think about those things and how our brains hijack us, I mean, that's truly the focus point of what I'm trying to do with this last book, is to say your brain is a tiny bit too grumpy. Okay, there is a piece of code written in there when once you start to get into your 3 years, 4 years of age, that is the grumpy code. Like, everything is wrong, and the grumpy code runs over everything. I have to admit, though, Lola, I never understood as much as I did with this work how much pain can teach us. I mean, I will say once again, this is heart-wrenching. I don't even know how you wrote it, but it is such a beautiful, heartbreaking, emotional wake-up call. I don't know. It's just so beautiful. I'll ask you my favorite question, my last question every time. So, of everything you've ever learned, everything you've ever achieved, what's your top tip for happiness?
Oh, okay. You didn't warn me about that one, did
I did
you?
not warn you about that one.
I had time to think about it, prepare my answer.
Yes, they don't know. It comes to you.
Be in the moment.
Be now.
Yeah, be in the moment. That's what I've learned. And I think it was fantastic what you just said about when you were in Vegas. And that moment it could have really turned negative into negative thinking that, why did this happen? Why were the books not ordered? And then you just kind of changed your way of thinking. You stayed in the moment and you were present because, okay, right now, I've just sold 2,000 books.
And spoken to 12,000 people, yeah?
And they're going to buy it afterwards, but you've actually spread the message that you wanted to spread. You've achieved your objective, and that's where the satisfaction is. So, I mean, there's many tips, but I think one I've learned is being in the moment. As I mentioned before, it's not about I'm going to be happy when I get this, and this checklist. It's good to have long-term goals, but short-term goals lead you to those long-term goals. So the short-term goal could be right now, I need to have a rest in this moment.
I do, actually.
Yeah, you probably do. You work a lot, don't you?
I do,
yes.
Sadly, especially when it's book launch time. Book launches, most people don't understand this. Writing the book is the biggest fun. Editing it is a little less fun. Publishing it, oh my God, so much work.
You have to learn to look after yourself in that time, Mo. You have to take time out, rest.
I keep telling me this, but then, I get the opportunity to meet wonderful people like you.
Don't bring me into this.
Can I ask you? Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
I think is very important. Being a Black woman and achieving the success you've achieved is mind-blowing. Tips?
Stay authentic. Don't let anybody try to mold you into something that you're not, which is any industry. Stay true to who you are. I know that sounds slightly cliche, but it's true. And, I know with writing, I write for me. I'm not, we spoke about sales figures and whatever, that they're lovely and we want that. But in the initial stages, that's not going to get you through this. Because there were times when I was writing and I was not getting paid a penny. I did it because I loved it. So you write for you, be authentic, explore your passion. Writing is a passion of mine. If I'm not writing, I don't know what I'm doing.
I know.
So, explore your passion. I mean, it's so amazing. Do what makes you happy.
Staying authentic, I think, is the key. I had a wonderful conversation with the European Woman of the Year, who got very, very badly discriminated against in the media because she was wearing a headscarf at the time. And we were really talking about that idea of staying authentic, the idea that if I am to succeed, it is not about trying to blend in by being someone who I'm not, because that's almost as if I'm discriminating against myself.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The idea is every one of us is different in a way. And I think once you pretend, you're almost reassuring the world that what they're discriminating against is their right. I think the opposite needs to be true.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I think you're being very, very authentic in your work, and it's really beautiful in every possible way. So yeah, I think that authenticity really, really matters.
Absolutely. And just to add to being authentic, also to acknowledge and re-acknowledge that is their stuff. Don't own other people's stuff. Your opinion of me is not my business. Okay. And I think that's really important because it's nothing to do with me. That's their own trauma. That's their own ideals.
Conditioning.
I'm me and I'm being authentic to me.
I think that makes all the difference in the world. You're wonderful. Love your work. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I will never forgive you for the pain, but it's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And for all of you joining us today, I definitely recommend Lola's work. I think it's... oh, I forgot to say, Jaye is...
Oh, Jaye is love life in Yoruba. My late mother kind of named me that.
Love life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to end. Love life, be who you are, be authentic. And I think that's truly, truly, truly what this work is about. At the same time, I also want to remind you that life will come with traumas and it will come with challenges and difficulties. And I think those of us who basically take those traumas as opportunities and do what they need to do to overcome them are the ones that really come out successful at the end. Lola, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for listening. As I always remind you, if you fill a 5-star review of this, then you're going to make a lot more people listen to it. If you're on YouTube, subscribe because I want you to subscribe and get the new episodes. If you are sitting next to a friend, just tell them to try some of those slow-mos. And whatever it is that you're doing today, if you're busy and running around like a maniac, like I have been for the last month or so, remember that there is always a tiny bit of time to slow down. I love you all for listening, and I will see you next time.